Ash veiled the morning sky like mourning cloth. The remnants of burned villages carried on the wind. Smoke rose in thin fingers from the borderlands of the human realm, twisting into the clouds like prayers left unanswered. The war had turned brutal months ago, but today the world seemed quieter, an unnatural hush that sat heavy on Serana's shoulders as she rode. Her armor, once radiant gold, was dimmed from countless battles, the etchings of her rank barely visible beneath grime and ash. She was the last of the Crimson Vanguard, the commander that mothers once whispered about to comfort their children, the steel-hard protector of the realm. But even legends tire. They had ridden through the night, a detachment of 40 elite knights under her command, loyal to their last breath. Ahead lay the ruins of Aswin, a stronghold that had fallen in a single night under mysterious circumstances. The king himself had sent her, his words clipped and cold. End this quietly. There can be no spectacle. She hadn't questioned him. Serana never questioned orders. That was her strength and her flaw. The path narrowed between twin ridges, trees creeping up the stone like watchful sentries. She held up a fist, and the column behind her slowed to a stop. Silence. Too much of it. A whisper through the leaves. The glint of metal where no metal should be. She drew her blade, just as the world erupted. Arrows hissed like snakes from every direction, tearing through armor with unnatural precision. Magic. Serana knew it instantly, forbidden as it was. Her soldiers fought back, but the enemy had them surrounded before they could even form ranks. Cloaked figures poured from the shadows. Not men, not elves. Something else. Something faster. Serana spun, slicing down a figure that lunged at her with clawed gauntlets. Another leapt onto her back. She slammed him against a rock, feeling bones give way. All around her, her knights were falling. Screams echoed against the stone walls, and the stream below turned red. Then came the crack, a hammer blow to her side. She staggered, another to her shoulder. Her sword fell from her hand. Someone grabbed her by the hair, slammed her to her knees. A foot pressed her back, forcing her down. She saw him then, standing at the far end of the narrow pass, robes untouched by the chaos, a crown of black steel resting low on his brow. The king of Varen. He looked bored. Serana of a human realm, he said, as if reciting from memory. Commander, daughter of Kael and Marin, unbroken, unyielding. She spat blood onto the rocks. You're a coward, hiding behind spells and ambushes. The king tilted his head, expression unreadable. Not hiding, strategizing. His soldiers moved in. She thrashed, kicked, but exhaustion clung to her like chains. They pulled her to her feet, stripped her of weapons and armor piece by piece. Her chest plate hit the ground with a dull clang. The crowd of enemies stood in a circle now, watching like wolves with full bellies, waiting to see if the prey still twitched. Her underclothes were soaked in sweat and blood. Her knees hit the dirt again. She tried to rise. The king stepped forward. His eyes were the pale gray of frostbitten skies. You are not to be touched. Not by hand or blade. I gave the order myself. She stared up at him, defiant even as her body trembled. I don't need to kill you, he continued. You'll do that yourself in time. Strip away the armor, and what's left? A name? A cause? Serana's voice was hoarse. A spine. The king gave a humorless smile. We'll see. He turned and walked away, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow with purpose. The soldiers bound her wrists with enchanted rope that singed the skin. They dragged her through the pass, past the bodies of her fallen soldiers, some of whom had been with her for years. One hand twitched. Kael, her second, still alive. She tried to reach for him. A soldier kicked his head in. She didn't scream. Not yet. They rode hard through enemy lands, her body jolting with every hoofbeat. Villagers stared at her as they passed, some curious, some sneering. Her armor had always gleamed with the promise of salvation. Now she looked like a prisoner of war, reduced and exposed. The capital of Varen was a cold marvel, towers of black marble, gates wide enough to admit dragons, and above it all, the obsidian keep of the king, a place where mercy went to die. She was paraded through it all. They didn't whip her, didn't strike her. Instead, They announced her name as they passed, loudly and clearly, until the city echoed with it like a dirge. They brought her to a hall that was far too vast, filled with onlookers, nobles, soldiers, and worse. The king stood upon a raised dais. They threw her to her knees before him, ropes still binding her wrists. The silence in the room was thick enough to drown in. The king's voice carried easily. "This is Serana, the one the humans called Indomitable. She will serve a new purpose now." She looked up slowly. Her lips cracked with dryness. "I'll never serve you." "You already have," he said softly. "You were the bait, and the trap is closed." Her eyes widened. Something cold slid down her spine. The mission, the strange silence, the unnatural ambush. He nodded, almost sympathetically. "Your king sent you, with orders. He gave me the time, the route, and your exact number, in exchange for peace." Lies. They had to be. She shook her head, but her stomach turned violently. She saw it now, too late, the way the human king had avoided her gaze. The missing scouts, the rushed orders, her armor, her pride, her faith, broken. The crowd erupted in cruel applause. And for the first time in her life, Serana felt small. She wasn't executed. That would have been a kindness. Instead, they took her to a chamber high in the tower, bare stone, no windows, a bed with no sheets. Her bindings were removed only after the guards were confident she couldn't stand on her own. The door slammed shut behind them. Darkness enveloped her. She curled into herself. No tears came. Not yet. The king's words echoed again in her skull. "You don't need to be touched to be broken." And still, through the hollow that had opened in her chest, some part of her clung to the silence. Not a surrender, but as the last thread of control she had left. Let him believe she was broken. For now, time passed like a wound that refused to clot. In the high tower chamber, Serana knew neither day nor night. Light did not touch her room, nor did sound, save the occasional rattle of chains outside her door or the soft click of a lock engaging. Food was delivered through a narrow slit in the wall, always the same: plain bread, stale broth. No voice accompanied it, no human contact, only stillness. She did not eat at first. Hunger gnawed at her ribs, but it was nothing compared to the hollowness that spread inside her. Slow and methodical, she kept her back straight, her jaw tight. She imagined herself a stone, unmoving, unbreakable. But even stone erodes when time is left unchecked. The silence was the worst part. It was not peace. It was suffocation. She had once lived by the rhythm of commands, the clang of blades, the sound of soldiers breathing beside her. Now, all she had was the echo of her own thoughts. And the questions. Had her king truly betrayed her? There had been no signs, no whisper of treachery. But the pieces, once scattered, now formed a pattern too cruel to ignore. Her orders had been too abrupt, the timing too perfect. The king of Varen had known her every step before she took it. She remembered her final meeting in the human court, how her own king had dismissed her salute with nod that felt more like dismissal than approval. She had told herself he trusted her implicitly. But trust, she realized now, could be a mask for guilt. Still, a part of her refused to accept it. If she did, then everything she had bled for, everything she had believed in, would become a lie. And Serana would not survive a world where honor was only a word spoken by cowards. The door creaked on the 5th day. She tensed, back straight again despite her body's protest. A figure stepped inside, not a soldier, not a mage. The king. He didn't speak at first. He merely studied her, the way one might study a caged animal to see if it still had the will to bite. Serana did not look away. "You haven't spoken," he finally said, his voice as even as it had been in the past. "There's no one worth speaking to," she replied, throat dry but voice steady. He smiled faintly, still proud. "That's good. I would have been disappointed otherwise." She wanted to lunge at him, to scream, but she didn't move. Rage would give him what he wanted. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap. "What is this?" she asked. "Interrogation by solitude?" "No," the king replied, stepping further into the cell. "It's revelation. You spent your life shouting orders and bathing in loyalty. I thought it might be instructive for you to experience what lies beneath all that noise. Loneliness? She asked with a sneer. I've known that since I was 10. He knelt then, lowering himself to her eye level. His face was carved from the same cold stone as his citadel. No, Commander, not loneliness. Irrelevance. The word landed like a slap. Do you think your people will storm my gates? He continued. They celebrated your disappearance. It gave them time to renegotiate terms. They have already named a new commander. A man this time. Easier to control. Lies. Or truths so cruelly twisted they felt like lies. Do you think I don't know your mind? He whispered. You cling to pride because you think it's your last offense. But pride without power is just another shackle. He stood and turned, walking toward the door. You'll see that soon enough. The door shut behind him with a finality that scraped against her bones. She did not cry. She did not scream. But when she curled up that night, she dreamed of the battlefield. Only this time, she was not fighting. She was watching, forgotten. The visits continued. He came with stories instead of questions. Tales of what was happening beyond her stone walls. The surrender of her people. The alliance struck in her absence. The increasing influence of the Varen court over human affairs. Each time, he offered no proof. And yet, doubt burrowed deeper. She began to speak, briefly, sparingly, testing the sound of her own voice. Once she asked, "Why keep me alive?" His answer was simple. Because death is clean. Serana's body weakened, but her mind sharpened. She began to listen more carefully to what he said and what he didn't, the details he omitted, the pauses before certain names. A new kind of clarity formed, one not forged on the battlefield, but in silence. She began to think of escape, not in terms of walls or windows, but of influence, of manipulation, of strategy. A blade could not serve her here, but she had learned long ago that words, in the right hands, cut deeper. She asked for paper. The request was denied. She asked for books. The request was granted. It started with histories. Varen's histories, of course, glorified and censored, but she read them anyway. She traced their lies, studied their myths. She learned the names of generals, of courtiers, of figures who stood near the king's circle. One name appeared more than once. General Loras, the king's right hand. Ambitious, unmarried, untrusting of mages, a chink in the armor. The king noticed the change. He said nothing, but she could see it in the way he watched her more closely now. Less like prey, more like a storm on the horizon. Then came the day when the king offered her freedom, not as a knight, not as a prisoner, but as an advisor. You know our tactics, our people, our weaknesses. Use them. Help end this war permanently. No more blood. No more children buried in mud. Just conclusion. She said nothing at first. Then finally, you want me to betray what's left of my people. I want you to lead what's left of them into survival. His logic was flawless. Cold, precise, and terrifyingly tempting. If she could help design the new world, maybe she could preserve something of the old. But she didn't trust him. Not yet. Still, she agreed. They gave her new clothes. Gray robes of a scholar. Her hair was cut, her body washed. No armor, no sword, but her name returned to her lips when others addressed her. Serana. No title. Just that. The war council met in a hall lined with maps and candles. She was silent at first, listening, watching, measuring, and then she spoke. Tactics, supply lines, the psychology of commanders, she knew it all, better than any of them, even the king. They listened, even Loras. Days passed, then weeks. No chains, no escape, but no freedom either. In her chamber, Serana stood before a narrow slit of glass they dared to call a window. Beyond it, she saw the city, cold and bright, unyielding. She whispered to her reflection, "You wanted to see what lay beneath the armor. Now you will." And in her eyes burned not surrender, but something sharper. The council chambers had grown colder with each passing session, not from the chill of stone or season, but from the unspoken weight pressing down on every man and woman seated at the long obsidian table. Serana, once barely acknowledged, now found her words carrying weight, dangerous weight. Each strategy she proposed, each correction she made, drew attention like blood and water. The king still presided from the head of the table, his face carved in patience, but she could see the flickers of calculation behind his eyes. He had brought her into his halls to fracture her, to peel away her identity and refashion it in his image. But something unexpected had occurred. Serana had adapted, not broken. She wore no armor now, but each sentence from her mouth came home like a blade, even her silence cut. General Loras was the first to voice concern. Always measured, always loyal, but never blindly. He watched her with the narrowed eyes of a hound that smelled poison beneath perfume. "Her loyalty is unproven," he said during one meeting, not even pretending to veil his disdain. "You've given her access to our most sensitive tactics. She knows our reach, our flaws, and that is precisely why she is here," the king replied without looking up, "to tighten those flaws, to anticipate what our enemies see. She is our enemy." Serana said nothing. She allowed the accusation to hang in the air like incense. Her silence unsettled more than any protest might have. Later that night, she was summoned, not to the tower, not to the council, but to the king's private library, a circular room with no corners, lit by floating orbs of blue flame. The walls were covered with scrolls and tomes older than memory, their pages curling like dried leaves. The king stood beside a map of the human realm, his fingers resting lightly on the border between kingdoms. Loras grows louder. "I noticed," she replied. "You've said little in your own defense. I don't need to defend the truth. Only liars need volume." He turned to her, something flickering behind his steady mask. "And what is your truth, Serana?" She met his gaze without blinking. "I serve peace. If that means standing among enemies to prevent more blood from staining the soil, then so be it. And if peace demands betrayal, then peace is a lie." The king smiled faintly, the way a sculptor might admire a chisel's new edge. "You're changing, Commander." "No," she said. "I'm remembering who I am." He said nothing else that night, nor did he dismiss her. They stood there, silent, facing the map. Two architects in a world too used to ruins. In the days that followed, something began to shift. Whispers filled the palace, of unrest at the fringes, of nobles questioning the king's leniency, of murmurs that Serana had begun to garner support from unexpected corners. Scholars, advisors, even a few young captains curious about her vision. She never asked for their loyalty, but they offered it all the same. Quietly, cautiously, as if drawn to a fire they didn't yet understand. And then came the moment she could not ignore. A letter, smuggled into her chamber, sealed with the old mark of the Crimson Vanguard, a symbol she had not seen since her capture. She stared at it for long moments before breaking the seal. Inside were 3 words, written in her second-in-command's hand. "Kale is alive." Her chest clenched as if pierced. He had been among the fallen. She'd seen his blood in the past. She had seen him twitch just once before silence took him. Hope surged, dangerous and bright. There was more. A date. A meeting point in the lower districts. A single sentence beneath it. "We are not finished." For the first time in months, her hands trembled. The decision wasn't easy. If it was a trap, it would end everything. But if it wasn't, she donned a hood that night. No escort. No guards. The robes hid her face, and the slums welcomed shadows without question. She made her way through the maze of alleys and torchlight, past the reek of refuse and whispers of resistance. At the designated square, she waited, and then a voice, "Commander." She turned. Kale stood in the archway, gaunt but upright, one arm in a sling, eyes lit by stubborn fire. He stepped forward and fell to one knee, not in reverence, but in pain. "We thought you were dead." "I was," she said, helping him up, "but death gave me time to think." He nodded, tears unshed. "We've gathered a few. Survivors. Deserters. Those who saw what the king did and couldn't bear to kneel." "How many?" "Enough to strike a nerve." Not enough to win. Serana looked beyond him, into the alley's depth where others waited, eyes full of old loyalty. Wounded, yes, but not broken. I need more time, she said. One misstep, and we lose everything. But if I can plant the seed from within, we'll be ready. They parted in silence, but her step as she returned to the citadel was different. Quieter, yes, but coiled like a storm gathering behind calm. Back in her chamber, she stared at her reflection. Gone was the gleaming armor, gone the banners. But her spine, her eyes, her fire, those had not been stripped. She was not here to bend. She was here to break the illusion. When she entered the council chamber the next day, Loras was already speaking. The unrest in the slums grows. The traitors multiply. We should answer them with iron. The king looked to her. Serana? She took her place, hands folded before her, voice cool and level. We must offer them purpose, not punishment. Let them believe they have a future in this new world. You would grant them mercy? Loras scoffed. No, she said. I would grant them a role in their own survival. It's not mercy. It's manipulation. Loras quieted. The king gave her a long, unreadable look. And in that look, Serana knew he no longer saw a prisoner. He saw a threat, exactly as she intended. The storm broke at midnight. It wasn't the thunder of battle that shattered the stillness, but the silence just before it, dense, electric, a pause in the breath of the world. The torches along the citadel's outer walls flickered against a wind that carried no scent and made no sound. Within, soldiers patrolled in rigid formations, unaware that history was about to pivot beneath their feet. Serana stood at the high balcony, overlooking the lower tiers of the city. Her fingers traced the edge of the cold stone railing. She wore no armor. Not tonight. The robes were enough. It wasn't steel that would decide what came next. It was intent, and hers had never been clearer. The king summoned her just before the first tremor reached the throne room. He stood alone, without guards, beside the massive obsidian seat carved into the mountain itself. The war room lay behind him, empty, maps cleared, plans erased. Only a single scroll remained, its seal broken. I know, he said, turning before she could speak. Then you know it's too late, she replied, stepping forward, voice unwavering. He studied her like a man beholding a blade he once forged, now pointed at his chest. You're not the woman I sent into that pass. I was never the woman you thought I was. He nodded, as if that truth had taken him years to accept. You used your silence well. You taught me how. A deep breath swelled in his chest. They're waiting in the lower district. Loras has already sent riders. They won't reach them in time. You trained Loras. And now, he fights a ghost he helped sharpen. The king walked toward her, each step unhurried, measured. You could have taken your revenge quietly. Poison, a blade in my sleep. But instead, you stirred the bones of rebellion. This isn't about revenge, she said. It's about reckoning. You didn't just try to break me. You used me to crush the spine of my people. I became your weapon. Now I'm theirs. He stopped only a pace away. His eyes searched hers for the soldier he once trusted, for the weapon he had tried to hollow out and command. She still exists, he said softly. No, Serana answered. She evolved. Far below, the sound of movement, swift, precise, began to rise. Torches lit in patterns. Signals from the lower walls. A low horn blew once, then twice. You can't hold the city, the king said. No, but I can fracture your grip. He turned away, staring into the dark horizon. They will blame me for this. My own court will turn. You ruled by fear. You forget what happens when fear turns into fury. He let out a breath, heavy with the weight of unraveling years. And you think your hand will stay clean? She stepped forward, close enough to whisper. No, but they will be my hands, my choices. Outside, the city ignited, not in flame, but in will. Civilians moved in tandem with cloaked figures. Barracks were breached from within. Food stores redirected. Loyalists disarmed by their own brothers. The plan had been precise, weeks in the making, Serana hadn't led them as a commander. She had taught them to lead themselves. A knock shattered the moment, sharp, urgent. A guard entered, blood across his armor, eyes wide with disbelief. "My king, the gates, lower gatehouses, they've fallen. We don't know how." "Because you weren't looking in the right places," Serana said, stepping past them both. "You were always afraid of armies. You should have feared the wounded." The king didn't stop her. She descended the steps of the citadel, like a shadow freed from the wall. Every hall she passed held echoes of the old self, memories of silence, of manipulation, of the months she spent becoming something sharper. The guards didn't stop her. Some nodded. One even saluted. Outside, Kale waited at the base of the mountain, flanked by rebels and defectors. His arm was free now, though the scar remained like a stripe of truth. "It's done?" he asked. "Not yet," she said, "but it's begun." The people move around them like water freed from ice. Not chaotic, not desperate, directed, inspired. What the king had never understood was that leadership was never about fear. It was about fire, sharing it, feeding it, trusting others to carry it into the dark. The next hours blurred into a rhythm of reclaimed streets, negotiated surrenders, and furious whispers. Not all surrendered peacefully. There was blood. There was grief. But for the first time, there was movement. Real movement. Not parades. Not speeches. Change. By dawn, the citadel was no longer silent. It breathed, and Serana stood once more in its highest chamber, overlooking a city no longer beneath its king. Loras was gone, escaped or dead. No one knew. The king had not fled. He remained in his chamber, waiting, unarmed. Serana visited him one final time. He sat alone, robe draped like a shadow across his shoulders. His crown rested on the floor beside him, as if discarded in defeat or offered in penance. "Will you kill me?" he asked without looking up. "No," she said. "That would make you a martyr." "An exile?" "You don't get exile. You get to watch what happens when the people you try to suppress remember they were never yours to rule." He looked at her then, not with anger, not even regret, but resignation. "Then go." She turned to leave, but paused. "You were right about one thing." He raised an eyebrow. "Pride is a shackle, and you still wear it." She looked back. "No, I forged it into a weapon." Outside, the people waited, not for orders, not for victory speeches, for direction, for hope. Kale approached her with a nod. "What now?" Serana looked out at the sunrise bleeding over the stone. "Now we rebuild, not the empire, the spirit." And with that, the woman once built for war stepped into a future of her own making. No armor, no orders, no crown. Just fire, and those willing to carry it forward.